Here's a crazy story. The United States might be working to revalue the way our gold holdings show up on the balance sheet. That would send the value of gold soaring, right? Well, I guess it could, but I don't get why anyone's paying attention to that part, though. What if the real story is what comes after that? So there are lots of big stories floating around in the gold circles right now. One is that Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency will be auditing the U.S. gold reserves in Fort Knox. That'll be interesting. Another is that gold is about to be revalued, and a third is that the U.S. is considering a sale of its gold reserves. Now, normally, these might seem like the same old stories that people use to plant seeds of fear, get you to feel like you're missing out if you don't buy a bunch of gold urgently, or maybe roll over your IRA right now. But hopefully by now you know that I'm not one to throw conspiracies at you. So let me start off saying all of these stories have actual roots in fact. Now let's also get it on the record that these are mostly unrelated stories, and even though they're all possible, especially an audit of US gold holdings, that doesn't mean they're all likely. We're going to try to stay above board here. So split the stories up, take them in order. Today, I'm just going to focus on the revaluation of gold story, what's driving it, and what it could mean. Now let's get a quick shout out to channel sponsor Summit Metals. If you're looking to buy gold and silver, and hey, if you're here, there's a pretty good chance of that, be sure to give them a shot. You can see for yourself just how good they are at summitmetals.com. Now the background you need about the U.S. revaluing gold or remarking the value of its gold is that the U.S. Treasury officially values its gold holdings at $42.22 per ounce. Now that's the price set by the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, and it was later adjusted in 1973. And look, we all know how outdated that is. Anyone watching this knows the market price of gold right now is more like $2,900 per ounce. So that valuation is off by a huge factor. So on the books, the US government is way undervaluing a very large reserve asset. The actual price of gold is approximately 68.7 times higher than the US Treasury's official valuation. Now, the US government currently holds around 261.6 million troy ounces of this stuff. So the official US gold reserve is valued at right around $11.04 billion. Don't worry about taking notes. I'll keep us all up to date here. The actual market value of that gold would make it worth $758.64 billion. It gets tough to read all these zeros. Now, the idea here is that by updating the value of the U.S. gold holdings, the Treasury General Account would now have an extra $746 billion just by performing this one simple accounting trick. Now, if you're wondering why this hasn't already been done, well, that's a really good question, with a few answers that aren't really good. One of those answers would be that the asset is mostly offset by a treasury liability, meaning gold certificates have been issued to the Federal Reserve at the statutory rate, so it balances out. Now, if you update the value, and especially if you let it float based on the fluctuating market price of gold, well, there's a lot of accounting that needs to be done. So that doesn't explain it away, but let's just pass over that part for now. The really interesting part of this story is where it's coming from and why it's important. So earlier this month, February 3rd, I think, Scott Bessent said, within the next 12 months, we're going to monetize the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet. So I think this is where people are trying to connect some dots that maybe shouldn't be connected, but I'm going to lay this out anyway. One reason to remark the value of the U.S. gold reserve is to give the Fed and the Treasury $758 billion to improve the U.S. balance sheet. Now, there's no harm in that, and the U.S. spends $758 billion every few months or so anyway these days, but if you consider the talk of a sovereign wealth fund, well, now it's going somewhere, because maybe it could even be sold to raise capital for other priorities, like, I don't know, Greenland or Bitcoin. Now, look, I just said that I'm not here to facilitate conspiracies. I don't pass them out. I don't give them more attention than they deserve. So let me be really clear here. I literally just made that part up. But other countries have sold their gold reserves, Canada, or big percentages of them, United Kingdom. So the idea is not one without precedent. Now, I've seen at least one news outfit suggest that if the US remarked its gold holdings to the proper market value, then the price of gold would soar. And really, I've had to think about that a few times just to understand the thinking. But it seems to be that if the US government could get past the logistical hurdles of repricing its gold holdings, then it would give them $758 billion of fund money to go out and spend however they wanted. And if you take that a step further, well, if the price of gold on the balance sheet was now floating with the market value, well, what's to stop a little bit of good old-fashioned price manipulation to push that value up, to free up more fund money? But you have to look at the other side of this too. If the administration went YOLO and sold off all of our gold holdings to buy Greenland, well, what would that do to gold price? It's hard to say. It could send it down. Now, the thing to consider here, though, is that any time there's a big story like this, there are chapters. One would be an accounting of the U.S. gold reserves. That'd be step one. The next would be some kind of approval to revalue the gold. Then it would be the approval of a sovereign wealth fund and probably some kind of executive order showing intent, maybe funding of that sovereign wealth fund through some or all of this revaluation. So look, that gives you plenty of notice well before any of this would ever affect your gold. And you can bet that we'll be talking about it here if any of those steps happen. So let's call it good there. Let us know what you think. Is there gold in Fort Knox? And would remarking the value on our balance sheet affect the price of gold? Also, how much gold would it take to buy Greenland in the first place? I mean, who knows? Maybe there's more gold in Greenland. So I know there's a lot to this one, so let us know what you're up to in the comments. And then while you're there, be sure to hit the like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to hear more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.